Hello, beautiful people. It's Sindafam. Welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to be checking this video from Piers Morgan. Let's check it out.
Well, good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. We spend a lot of time in this country wringing our hands about American gun violence. How can this be happening in 2023? We ask repeatedly, tragedy after tragedy. Why does it seem like nothing ever gets done? Well, guns aren't widely available in Britain, but knives are. And we increasingly have a deadly and terrifying recurring problem of our own. Last week, 15-year-old Eliane Andam was stabbed to death at a bus stop in Croydon, London. She was just trying to get to school. Last week, there were 2 other stabbings in that one tiny corner of London. And yes, clearly the capital has a specific and serious problem with knife crime. It's not just London. A 16-year-old boy was stabbed to death in Luton last week. 5 teenagers were wounded in 2 shocking knife attacks there on the same day. This weekend, there was a triple stabbing in Halifax. 2 young people are dead. One 21, the other just 19. 2 men were stabbed to death in Leeds. Barely a day passes without more of this bloodshed. And this is the kind of response we get every time.
My number one priority, and the thing that keeps me up at night, is the safety of Londoners.
So it's not just about policing, it's not just about stop and search. So that's fantastically important. It's also about wrapping your arms around the kids and putting them on the right track.
The death of anyone through an act of violence is an appalling tragedy.
I want to say how shocked and saddened I am that 3 people have lost their lives.
Just words, isn't it? Just word salad, putting arms around them. Is that going to stop kids stabbing each other? It's not, is it? We all know that. For all the condolences and the talk of getting tough, the fact is the people who want to hurt us no longer fear the consequences if they do. Police numbers are down, budgets have been slashed. They've stopped taking everyday crimes even remotely seriously. When the Home Secretary announced last month that police must investigate all thefts, it was supposed to be a huge innovation. My question would be, what the hell were they doing before? Shoplifting is now out of control in Britain. Store thefts have more than doubled, and they're only getting worse. In America, it's the same issue, emboldened by absurd policies on not prosecuting minor offenders. Shoplifting, especially of the steaming variety, with dozens and dozens of shoplifters entering a store at one time, has become an epidemic. It's little wonder that Donald Trump got an ovation over the weekend for saying this.
And we will immediately stop all of the pillaging and theft. Very simply, if you rob a store, you can fully expect to be shot as you are leaving that store.
I don't think shooting shoplifters is the right response. I don't think guns are the right response, but there does need to be a response. We're dealing with a systematic breakdown of fear and respect of authority at the very same time as a failing economy means desperate people are more willing to risk more. The result is chaos, fear and tragedy. It's got to stop. So the question is how? Well, joining me now is my pack, Talk TV contributor Esther Cracker, the socialist author Grace Blakely, political journalist Ava Santina, and for the US perspective, the former wrestler and Fox News star Tyrus. Well, welcome to all of you. Tyrus, let me start with you. What is causing all this? In America, young people invading stores with total impunity because they know there's no real consequence. Here we have an endemic now of knife crime, young kids stabbing each other. America has obviously ongoing huge gun violence problems. The common theme in all of them is there is in my opinion, a smaller and smaller estimation by the people carrying out all this stuff that there will be any real accountability for it.
Well, and you're brilliant as always, but here's the thing. We got 2 things in common. We have knives in England and we have guns in America, 2 very different violent weapons. But what we have in common is we have awful people. We have horrible parenting. Grandparents are afraid of their grandchildren. A complete breakdown of our consequences for our children, which starts at home. We've got the bulldozer parents in America where if a kid does something at school, they want the teacher fired, not the child punished. So, and you can see that when they're growing up, and now you have no consequences. When they are arrested, they're released in America. If you steal, I think it's like $500 to $900 American, it's not considered a crime anymore. So that's the biggest problem, is that we have to start realizing it's not the weapons and the utilities they use. If we took knives away in England, they'd probably use trucks and cars or bats. It's horrible people. We have awful people in this first world they have so many things they can do. They don't have to work hard for anything, and there's no consequences. These are first world problems coming back to bite us in countries that are successful, because in third world countries and things like that, when you steal, when you do horrible things, there are real consequences.
Exactly what he said, because the first world countries majority of the time embrace liberalism, and now you with this influx of like young people trying stealing and all of that, exactly, no real consequences, because if there were, I don't think we would see this crazy amount at which we see now, because they know that okay, when they do it, it's gonna be forgiven, or it's gonna be light sentencing and all of that, and they know that nothing is going to be done to them, or they're just going to go scot-free. Exactly, in third world countries or many third world countries, this cannot happen, or in some countries this cannot happen. As much as we want to deny the fact, it is true. And also the part where he talked about parenting, absolutely true, because lots of parents now, or lots of parents are told, oh, not to blame the child, it's not always going to be the child's fault and all of that. So I mean, there is no real discipline in terms of growing up for some people. So sometimes some parents are to be blamed for their kids bad choices, because I mean, lots of parents don't discipline their kids, lots of parents do be parents towards their kids. In some third world countries, let's use for example some of the Islamic countries, where they know, or people know, that stealing is going to cost you an arm, they're not going to steal, because obviously you know you will not want to risk stealing something, or risk doing something, or risk collecting something that doesn't belong to you to lose your arm. So obviously people are not going to steal. So I mean, kind of that kind of has been controlled. Should this law be implemented in the Western country? No. But I mean, real discipline should be implemented, so that people who want to do something like this would know that okay, yeah, there is real consequences, and they're not going to take the chances.
You steal a lot, you lose a hand in some cases. So just the idea of that will refrain people. But right now, our kids across the sea in America basically feel they can do whatever they want, and there's no parenting. It's horrible parenting.
Right. All right, Grace, I could see a lot of facial expressions going on there.
There have always been horrible people. You know, it's very easy to look at the situation and say, oh, it's just because we've suddenly been giving birth to loads more horrible people. That obviously isn't the case. If we look at this, you know, just objectively, if we look at the facts, if we look at the statistics, the studies on what causes violent crime, the single biggest predictor across the board of levels of violent crime across time and space is inequality. Why? It's not just because people are poorer and they want, you know, to access more stuff. That is a problem. It's because in a society that denies particularly young men access to advancement, then violent crime becomes something of a status symbol. This is borne out across sociological studies across time and space. It becomes, you know, there's an incentive to kind of kill someone than to steal their trainers, because it becomes a status symbol, because we haven't got those routes for advancement for young men.
Because, I mean, Tyrus touched on a point in saying that in third world countries, you don't necessarily have this problem because there are actual social consequences, which I think is an important point he touched on. When I was a kid growing up in Ghana, if you stole something in our neighborhood, doesn't matter who finds out, whether it's your neighbor or someone else, once your family gets to know, there will be consequences.
Yeah.
Sometimes your neighbor might discipline you. The issue here is a breakdown of legal and social consequences, and that's what we're missing.
I agree,
there has to be ostracization and actual social consequences for stealing, but there also has to be legal penalties, real ones that actually terrify you.
Talk about inequality. Is inequality part of it? Obviously, people are always going to have something more than other people. So blaming it on inequality, I don't think so. Some parents made bad choices not to train their children, or not to discipline their children hard enough. We understand this lifestyle in the Western society, but at the same time, some parents don't groom their kids. Sometimes they don't even know how to tell their kids no, or they don't know how to tell their children no. And sometimes if they do something wrong in school or in class or whatever, and they are reported, the parents there are no real consequences, or the parents don't even discipline their kid. You hear some parents will say, oh, not my kid, or whatever, and all of that, and be like, oh well, the child will do better, they're going to talk to him, and they don't even talk to the child and all of that. So I mean, parenting also plays a lot. Exactly what Esther said. In some places, people know the real consequences, so they're not going to steal. So if there are real consequences, real discipline, kids or people who try to make an act like this, then they know they're not going to take their chances. I remember back then in Nigeria, in my hometown, people know that if they steal something, there are real consequences. Let's say, for example, somebody who tries to steal from his neighbor or tries to steal something, they know the real consequences. For example, an example of a consequence, or a real one of the consequences, is you steal, the person who caught you, it doesn't have to be your parents, but if somebody caught you stealing, you're gonna dance naked, and you're gonna move around the town. And nobody wants to embarrass themselves, or nobody wants that type of embarrassment. So obviously people know that, okay, they're not going to try that. If they do, then everybody in the community is going to know that you're a thief, and people are going to know who your parents are, because they're going to dance around the town and tell people, or inform people exactly what you've done. Other possible cases, some people would kind of discipline you themselves and report you, or take you to your parents and make sure your parents discipline you, or report to the forces and all of that. There are other cases, and there are lots more. People may not see it in this light, but obviously lots of some people who know the real consequences, or people who know that there are hard long consequences of stealing, would not even try themselves to want to steal. So where are the parents on this? When are parents gonna discipline their kids? We're not talking about caning your kids. We're not talking about like um punishing your child and all of that. But sometimes parents need to learn how to tell their kids no, and also prepare them for the real world, because obviously some parents don't know how to train their kids. And also talk about equality. There is always going to be inequality in the society. It's not going to change. So is that an excuse, or is that a justifiable reason for people to go steal?
I've got to say, I've come round. I mean, Tara's talked about third world countries. You look at someone like Singapore or Hong Kong. I've walked the streets of these places at midnight, right? You just don't get this kind of stuff there, because the penalties, if you do, are severe. And I keep being told by the wishy-washy brigade, Ava, look, you can't be too tough on these kids. You've got to be... Actually, why? Why don't we just say, right, the next time a young kid is caught with a knife on the street, they get 10 years in prison? I can tell you, it would soon stop. Well, and it may sound like I've morphed into a right-wing headbanger. I can assure you, most people in this country would share that sentiment. So why aren't we doing tougher things like that?
Well, I don't know. The extreme of your argument is we turn into Saudi Arabia and then we just throw away anyone who might, look like they're committing a crime, or then we execute them. Which
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about people carrying a knife with intent to use it, not for cutting up their cheddar cheese.
On your point there about 10 years, well, we've got a prison system at the moment that doesn't work. It doesn't rehabilitate people. And at the moment, we are turfing people out. Sorry, we're throwing them into prison and they're coming out the other side, and they're not rehabilitating. They're going back to commit more crimes.
So how are you going to stop the kids stabbing each other?
I think it goes back to what Grace says. I think it's a social issue. I think that we've got to really tackle inequality. We've got to look at this long term rather than thinking, what's the short term solution? Throw everyone, lock everyone up and throw away the key.
Well, hang on. Okay, hang on. I'll come to us. Before we look, inequality seems to me, with great respect, one of those vacuous generic terms, like a sort of catch-all excuse for what is going on here. I know lots of kids who come from poor backgrounds who do not go around stabbing people because their parents... And this can apply, by the way, to lower class people, to middle class people, to so-called upper class people. I went to a fee-paying school till I was 13, then state comprehensive school. I've seen all manner of people, right, and parents. The common theme of kids that behaved well, or at least felt shame and accountability if they were caught doing bad things, was strong parenting. Right? Teachers, yes, and authority, yes, but actually strong parenting.
I've just explained to you
But that's not about equality.
No, it is. It's about the mechanism through which inequality affects violent crime.
It's not about equality.
You can say, for example, not every kid who's been in institutional care is going to end up on the streets. But we know, statistically speaking, that children who've been in institutional care are much more likely to end up on the streets.
Are you promoting strong families?
What I'm saying is there is a clear and causal link between the things that happen to you as a child that accounts for things like whether or not you're in a strong community, whether or not you're in a strong family, but also
I would say
what happens to you when you're an adult.
things like successive governments, Labour and Conservatives, selling off playing fields by the dozen, right? Cutting back on sport, cutting back. I did a documentary on hoodies, right? Kids that wear hoodies and commit a lot of crime. And a lot of these kids, when I interviewed them, said, well, there are no like youth clubs anymore, right? They just shut them all down.
Totally.
So there's nothing else to do. They get bored.
No, but it's also the internet, isn't it? Like, I don't want to sound like some sort of like draconian figure, but you know, it is the rise of social media. And if you are in an algorithm and you're on TikTok or Instagram that is promoting violence to you, you do sit in an echo chamber.
All right, let me bring in Tara, because you've been listening to this, Tara. So I think you want to add some more on this.
Hey, let me say this again. She has absolutely no idea what she's talking about, with all due respect.
Which one? Because it could be one of
I think he's talking about me.
You got to narrow it down here, Tara.
The feeling's mutual.
It's the community. That's what has broken down. They're spoiled. Everyone spends all their time on social media and Facebooks, and they say, oh, it's inequality. I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, ghetto slum USA, but you know what? We had strong families and parents, and we were poor, but we didn't act poor. We worked hard, we paid our dues, and we got things together. Now, everyone makes excuses. If your kid's bad, he's not a bad child, you're not a bad parent. He has something wrong with him that you can't correct. So it has nothing to do with inequality. That's just a good answer from first world virtue signaling elites to say, because you can't fix that.
Well, I'm going to say that's probably
a load of work.
Probably long. I'm going to say, Tara, probably long overdue that Grace Blakely was called.
On that band had some form of inequality. It's ridiculous.
I agree with you, and it's high.
Being raised by lazy people.
I agree.
Period.
It's high time Grace Blakely was called a first world elite as well. I've been waiting for that taunt.
Exactly what Tara said. Well, because why exactly is inequality used as an excuse? So because somebody does not have something, so is that an excusable reason for them to go steal from other people? So what are you saying? So people should, because they don't have this and somebody has it, so they should steal? Because, I mean, none of it is making sense. That means you're telling people now, if you don't need to work, you can go steal, and I mean, there's a prize that is going to be given to you. Are you serious? Because, I mean, train up your child the way he should grow. Because obviously, if kids know, or if children know the possible consequences of what is going to happen, they're not going to steal. They're not even going to try themselves. The sad reality, or the sad part of it, is the fact that many parents don't want to be parents towards their kids no more, or don't want to be parents. They're just lazy. They just want to give in to say, oh, well, that's who my child is, or that's how the child is. There's nothing I can do to fix it. Well, it's your job as a parent to be responsible and discipline your child. We're not saying you have to cane your child and all of that, but I mean, if they are groomed to know or face real consequences for some certain actions, then they know that they're not going to try that in their adult life. Do you want to tell me that everybody who is grown here, some people did not grow up from poor communities or poor places? They did. So does that mean that is because they grew up from a very poor background, or they have a very poor background, or they grew up from a very poor home, so that's going to be an excusable reason for them to go steal? Like, make it make sense. None of this is even, it doesn't even make sense. I mean, these are the things that we really need to talk about, because obviously now blame it on social media. Before the era of social media, people don't exist. People did, but I mean, is what you do at home as a parent that matters. Discipline your child. Learn to tell your child no, and be present, because obviously if people get real consequences, real life consequences, I don't think you're gonna steal. Because obviously, let's even look at it from the let's look at it. Lots of people who know what it entails to steal. Let's say, for example, people know the damages it's going to do to their reputation, or the damages it's going to do to their public image. Do you expect them to go steal? Do you expect them to go rob a store? Do you expect them to go to commit a crime? I mean, all of this, we need to even talk about it. But saying because social inequality, nah, come on.
Look, I've got to say, I agree with Tyrus.
So easy.
No, simply saying it's inequality.
And say, it's so much easier to
So how do you
say,
explain?
lock them up, throw away the key. Look how tough I am.
How do you
My
explain?
society.
Grace,
Cut off your hand if you.
I can
How
give,
do
I
you
can give, I can
easy,
give
and
you
How do you explain?
doesn't change
Look,
anything.
it's not all show
example.
How do you explain, if it's all about inequality, that so many people who have very little in life in this country do not commit these crimes?
Because it is about a whole set of factors that determine, you know, the way in which you were raised, and then the kind of characteristics you have when you grow up. Look, again, it's the same thing. It's what I just said. We know that children who grow up in institutional care are much more likely to then go out onto the streets, end up on the streets, end up homeless, end up taking drugs, end up interacting with the criminal justice system. That isn't to say that every kid who has who is in institutional care is going to end up that way. But we know that if you don't experience love, community support, that's going to be a problem.
The biggest point here is culture, because I can paint two different pictures here. If we look at the black community in the UK, you actually look at the sort of the rates of criminality amongst Black African children compared to Black Caribbean children, and there's a huge disparity. And one of the biggest reasons is because of culture, because some kids in one particular group grow up with church-going families with strong values. You know, if you go and carry a knife around and your Nigerian mother finds you, you will probably get slapped across the face. And you have the other side of the spectrum that don't actually have that, and you can see huge disparities there. So it actually comes down to culture.
I don't disagree with you, but the question is, how do we then build supportive cultures young people to exist in?
You have to actually
it means
build
investing in communities. I agree.
Yeah.
We've just said the same thing.
It's a public health
But you also
issue.
have to penalize criminality in a very severe way. There is no reason why someone should be able to carry a knife on the street
when
and then get a slap on the wrist.
What happens when they come out the other side and they find themselves homeless and they don't have any money? What do they do? They
Next time
commit
you're not
another
going to carry
crime.
around a knife then, are you?
No, but you are going to commit another crime.
I mean,
why are you
in
gonna
the
do that?
US, you can get literally shot or asphyxiated just for failing to stop for police cars.
But-
There's
no, but
still an
that's-
epidemic of
that's
knife crime here.
institutional issue.
You can, but you know
But
what
you're
worries
not
me
gonna-
about the knife crime? It's getting worse here, and they're acting with more impunity, and more kids are carrying knives. So at some point, we've got, as a society, yes, we can lecture the Americans about their gun violence, and I've done that many times.
And it's not just gun violence, it's police
I think
violence.
it's nuts they don't do more. I also think it's nuts we don't do more about knife violence here.
I mean, look, the Americans literally give police forces so much money. They give them like assault rifles, these massive weapons, you know, weapons that are used in literal states of war, and yet that isn't solving the problem.
Yeah,
because you
and-
cannot
but
just
they're
solve the
not-
problem
All right, well,
by
let's-
threatening to kill people.
All right,
Exactly what Esther said. Culture also has to do with it, because lots of people who know there are real consequences, because obviously this boils down to parenting majority of the time. Some of the laws in place for consequences or for acts like this, because obviously there are no real penalties that people would face that will make them okay, this is really damaging, or this consequences is gonna hurt them, because at this point we're talking about people that really don't care about what's gonna happen to them. So obviously, look at the lifestyle, look at where the background, or look at where they're coming from. Obviously they've never been told no, they've never faced real life consequences, they've never been taught real hard discipline or real discipline. So obviously it starts from the background. But exactly, we have to excuse that, because social inequality is what is being discussed here. Because explain to me how, because somebody has more than the other person, so the other person, because he doesn't have, is an excusable reason for him to go rob his neighbor. Seriously. Well, the hard truth is, if people know there are real damaging consequences for some certain actions, I don't think people will commit a crime, because lots of the time people see that okay, all they're just gonna get is just a slap on the wrist, and they're gonna do it again, or they're gonna try it again, because obviously there is no punishable act for what they've done. But if there is, they're not gonna try it again. So parents, be parents, and parents, learn how to train your kids. It's that simple. Some of the time, lots of parents leave their kids to be trained by the government, and like I always say, there is only so little the government can do. The rest is up to you as an individual or as a parent. So you as a parent, take the responsibility to train up your child and act accordingly. It is that simple. But to say social inequality is what is the reason, or is an excusable reason for people to go steal or go commit a crime, does not cut it. Let me know what you think about this so far. I'm sure tons of people have interesting things to share. I would really love to share that, and share the useful information you think might be really helpful. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and all of that stuff. And until next time, see you in the next video.